everybody. So I'm going to be doing the YouTube Pagan Challenge Week 18. I decided not to do them in order, and I decided to just kind of pick and choose which ones I want to talk about. That week was about views on Divinity. I guess I'll start from the beginning, my beginning. What really drew me to Wicca was the Wiccan theology, which was really ironic because I was an atheist at the time. And I was atheist because it was comfortable. A lot of people kind of assume that atheists might have trouble with a lack of feeling of depth, meaning, purpose. They might fear death, like what's going to happen afterwards. They might feel alone, like they have nobody watching over them. That wasn't my experience. It was like a load off, just kind of denying all things metaphysical. I didn't think about it. It just wasn't in my realm. I didn't say that, it could never possibly exist. It just wasn't a part of my life anymore. And it was a load off. I felt really comfortable. To me, it made the most sense. And that's a word I'm going to be repeating. And it's a word that's going to be important in this video. First reading about Wicca, and then when I got to the point where I learned about the god and the goddess, I found it incredibly intriguing. 2 gods, a male and a female, and they're lovers? That's the first time I've ever heard something like that. It was fascinating to me. And I thought it was very interesting, so I wanted to learn more. And as I was getting involved in it, there was a part of me that was kind of like, what would it be like if I was a Wiccan? So I kind of was entertaining that idea. I knew that witchcraft is of course, extremely important in Wicca. That was the basis of the entire religion, was witchcraft. But witchcraft can exist without theology. And theology was a very important part of Wicca. So I knew I had to acknowledge the god and the goddess. And trying that made me physically ill. I just felt sick to my stomach, acknowledging their possible existence. So it was hard going. But I knew that to be Wiccan, to practice this religion, I had to acknowledge them. And it wasn't even that I wanted to be a witch. I wanted to practice Wicca. And it wasn't even a conscious thing. It wasn't even like I really want to. It was like a bad rash. It just wouldn't go away. When I picked up some Vivian Crowley books, I learned, she's a Jungian psychologist, and her concept of the god and the goddess was comparable to Carl Jung, that the god and the goddess exist as archetypes that were within the collective conscious, and that we could connect with them that way. So essentially, arguably, you could be an atheist and be a Wiccan at the same time. It made me more comfortable to think that, to the point where I felt more comfortable about pursuing Wicca personally. But it didn't feel right. But I wanted to learn more. I wanted to kind of maybe practice a little bit. Just the rituals and stuff. Maybe kind of do some very simple spells. Nothing too complicated. And kind of hold off on the god and the goddess. Now I knew that I had to connect with them. But I felt like it will come. I just need to coast through. Eventually I started watching a lot of witches on YouTube talk about their theological concepts. The majority of them talked about the diamond hypothesis, or soft polytheism, that there was one pantheistic godhead, and from that godhead came 2 dual aspects, which were the god and the goddess. And from the god came all gods, and from the goddess came all goddesses. That's the diamond hypothesis, that you have one diamond with many faces. So that concept made me not quite, I wasn't as comfortable as I was as an atheist, but it made enough sense where I was comfortable enough. But it didn't feel right. And I guess the reason why it didn't feel right is, do you remember that movie Multiplicity with Michael Keaton? I've never seen it, but I think as far as I remember, and this might be completely wrong, his clones were aspects of himself, that they were part of his personality. When you have clones, you don't really connect with them, right? They're just, they're like disposable. Like if one of them dies, it's not a big deal. It's what it is like, it's the source of the clone that's important, right? So how do you connect with those clones? In a sense, trying to connect with the god and the goddess in that hypothesis was like trying to connect with cardboard cutouts. It was not working for me. And it seems to work for a lot of Wiccans, but it just wasn't my experience. So it didn't feel right. So I was just trying to think of some kind of way where I can explain how these entities exist in a way that felt right and made sense. And I absolutely couldn't. I couldn't do it. I could not connect with the god and the goddess because I couldn't figure out how they existed. And I was just so preoccupied with that. And then I thought, wait a second, why does it matter? It does not matter to me. It made me think about what my relationship with religion is. So far in pursuing Wicca, I realized that I don't look at religion for truth. I look at like science for truth. And as best as I can, I'm not a scientist, so, I kind of have to put some faith into these experts. But I believe strongly in the scientific method, that it's the best possible way of observing the environment around us. That's what I look towards for truth. Do I believe infallibly that that's the truth? No, but that would be my go-to place for truth. And I don't go to religion for morality. And I don't think most people do. I, pick up my morals based off of just going through life and possibly what I learned from psychology, just through my experiences, through advice, particularly from my mother. There's a lot of different places where I try to make up my mind of what's right and wrong, and religion is not one of them. So what's left? And then I realized, I think there's one commonality that people have of why they pursue religion, that maybe people have a lot of different ideas of why they would pursue religion. But there's one thing in common, is spiritual fulfillment. And that's kind of hard to describe what exactly that is. But people try to be spiritually fulfilled in a lot of different avenues. Religion is just one, and it's a really effective way. That's why most people are religious. Well, arguably you could say that, most people are religious because they're raised that way, but there are a lot of people that go towards religion, like myself. I became atheist, and I went towards religion because I realized that particularly Wicca was the best way for me to feel spiritually fulfilled. So, there's other ways, like people can feel spiritual fulfillment through very deep philosophical concepts. They can feel it through all these different types of life experiences. And the fastest and the strongest way is doing drugs. You could feel a sense of ecstasy from religion, philosophical concepts, incredible experiences, and drugs. Religion, specifically Wicca, was the one that seemed to be, I guess, calling me, for lack of a better word. Turned out to be a good decision that I pursued it. It worked. It really worked. So, if I don't look to religion for truth, Why am I so hung up on trying to explain away how my gods exist? I stopped thinking about it. And I decided for myself what the best way was for me to connect with the god and the goddess. And that was just to simply believe that they were their own entities, that they were personal gods. And I wasn't comfortable with that at first. It was the hard polytheistic concept, but it is also a concept that a lot of people have just with their monotheistic concept, that gods exist with their own personalities. They make decisions. They possibly impact the world. That they're not these amorphous beings that are difficult to understand, but that they are kind of just like people. But they just have different abilities and, I guess, different ways of existing in the world. Something like that. But gosh, it just kind of seems like that point of view is like so primitive, right? The whole idea of a personal god. And atheists will snarkingly compare them to like imaginary friends. So I wasn't comfortable with that. And it's not to say that hard polytheists are unsophisticated and primitive and uneducated. I don't know many hard polytheists. I haven't really observed them on YouTube either. For all I know, they could be demographically the most educated, the most sophisticated, the most deep. And perhaps they have explanations of how gods and goddesses can exist in the world as their own entities that will make sense. But I just stopped thinking about it. I stopped worrying about it. And I just said to myself, just undeniably believe that they exist in such a way that you could talk to them like people. And then, in that sense, you'll be able to commune with them. And I guess it does make sense to think of it that way in order to be able to communicate with them. Because if you think about it, we could all exist in a turtle's dream out in outer space. Or all of us individually could just be dreaming. And everybody around us doesn't exist. And if we're so concentrated on that thought, how are we going to function at all? If we're so concentrated on whether or not our friends, our family actually exist, we won't be able to connect with them because we will be so hung up on the idea that maybe we're talking to nobody. And that just seemed like the same concept. That I was so hung up on how they exist that I couldn't even commune with them. And it just became purposeless. And I just said, I'm just going to believe in them, you know. I'm not going to fight to the death in my belief for them. Actually just saying I believe in them, I say it half-heartedly. Because I guess I still maintain kind of some agnosticism in the sense that, you know, I don't know for sure. And I'm not really going to claim to know, but I'm going to worship them. I'm going to communicate with them. I'm going to try and commune with them. And maybe all of it is just like, you know, I'm trying to communicate with nobody. But I'm not in the business of trying to find truth through religion. I want spiritual fulfillment. And to connect with my gods and to worship my gods as if they do undeniably exist is how I get there. And it has worked. It has worked so well. I've been doing full moon SBOTs. And as far as I understand, an SBOT is really just kind of some ritual and an acknowledgement of a certain stage of the moon. I think sometimes witches will acknowledge the new moon. I only acknowledge the full moon in ritual. So what I'm doing might have nothing to do with traditional rituals in Wicca in regards to acknowledging the full moon or an Esbot or anything. But I did write up a ritual. I did decide what I wanted to do. And I crafted it in such a way that I would be able to commune with the goddess in the best way possible. And it's just been so incredible. I've been able to experience this kind of ecstasy through communing with a theistic being. And it would be so great. It'd be like rolling, a little bit. Rolling or being on ecstasy is a lot more intense. It lasts a lot longer. But you have really bad crash, so. But it's comparable. It feels close enough. So it would be ecstatic. It would be incredible. It would just be like overwhelming. So it was a full moon a couple of nights ago, and I did a full moon Esbot. And I thought it was just going to be like a normal one. It'd be just incredible, just like feeling. And what I do is I try to connect with the goddess through like the lunar powers of the moon or something like that. Connect with her through the full moon. When I prepare to do that, it's like kind of a physical connection because I literally feel something, like physically feel something. I was getting ready to do that, and I have 4 lines that I say specifically. And I got 2 words into the first line, and all of a sudden, my body just starts shuddering. And that was shocking because I usually have to do like, kind of your visualization type thing where you just kind of get this idea of, just kind of picture or pretend about how it would happen, just like get an idea, and then it would be easier to feel it. I didn't concentrate at all. I was just trying to go through the words, and it just started to happen, and this experience was so overwhelming. I explain this kind of ecstatic experience. I mean, it's euphoria. It's more than happy. It's so difficult to explain because it's just beyond happiness. That you really can't even call it happiness. It's beyond happiness, and euphoria is the best word for it. The intensity of this feeling was so much. I just totally lost myself, and I was not even trying at that point. I wasn't making any effort. It just kind of overcame me. And it was different, and it made me realize that those times before were wonderful. It was like experiencing a fragrance, and this time was experiencing a taste. Before, I wasn't expecting full moon Esbots to feel that much more physical, that much more incredible. That maybe I thought it would be more powerful. Maybe I had more interesting experiences, but it wouldn't get beyond that. But this time it did go beyond that. And what was so fascinating is that for some reason, part of me knew that that was just scratching the surface at that point. That before it was just like echoes of her. But this time it was just like, it was like closing in on a presence of her. And I just knew in that instance there was so much more. It was incredible. And it helped to try and connect with her as if she was a person. So I stopped trying to explain it. I stopped trying to explain it away so that I would feel comfortable, so that it would make sense. I just went with my gut. Because that's what my pursuit in religion is all about. Is just feelings and having spiritual fulfillment. It's not about finding truth. It's certainly not about finding morality. I got other things for those concepts. But in spiritual fulfillment, there were other avenues that I could go through. And for some reason, someone, and I guess it's myself, I did not consciously decide that Wicca was right for me. It was like I said, it was a bad rash. It would not go away. But it turned into something that was incredibly beneficial. And honestly, I can't wait to see more.